Blake, when's the last time you had goo shoved up both ear canals while a doctor told you to bite down on this?
Toby, what if I told you about telling people how we interview people at ChurchGear?
Welcome to the ChurchGear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who is still trying to hear after getting all that goo out of my ears. And I'm here with my co-host who instituted this crazy practice for new hires, Toby Walters.
Can you imagine if part of the interview process at ChurchGear was getting goo in your ears? Like, I don't even, it sounds like a church summer camp, like a youth camp game.
Kind of sounds like a fraternity initiation, and like the prank is not just that you get goo in your ears, it's that we tell you you're getting measured for in-ears and you don't even get them.
That would kind of suck.
That would be
you go through the
pretty
process.
mean.
One time I think a couple times my daughter has put things in her ears. It was when she was much younger, but I know that one time it was a Cheerio, and it took us like 2 hours to tweeze out all the Cheerio parts from her ear. Like that poor little girl. Yeah.
Now that I think about it, other than your eyes, I think your ear has to be the worst place to have something in your body.
I might disagree. I can think of other places I would not want things.
I can now think of one other. Let's say that for ChurchGear After Dark.
So our old buddy, new buddy, continuous buddy, Eddie Cruz, 64 Audio. So we reached out to Eddie because people keep making fun of our big, ugly headphones that we wear.
They keep saying we have big, ugly cans. And I'm like, I thought cans were supposed to be big.
Yeah.
So they look fun. They look like we're going to space.
Absolutely. But somebody suggested, well, maybe you should get some InEars made. And we reached out to Eddie. And do you remember we had Eddie on the pod, and he is like deathly afraid of bugs in his hotel room?
Oh, I do remember this.
Yeah. So I just released a bee into his room, and I was like, I'll get it back if you can hook us up with some ears.
And before Eddie got back to his room, I had to get the bee out of the room and then say, if we did a sponsorship with 64 Audio, get some free in-ears in exchange for some sponsorships, shout outs. What if we could do that? And Eddie was like, that's fine. Also, if Toby puts a bee in my room, I will have his in-ears explode. They can do that to any in-ears on the planet. It's a special feature of theirs. So
we're waiting on our ears, which we're very excited about. We still have these big, ugly cans. But Blake, you and I had a little special outing. It was kind of your birthday trip to get your ear canals filled with goo.
Yeah, and it was very painful. If you've ever had in-ears done and it didn't hurt, you're more hardcore than me. That was pain.
And so we go into the audiologist, I think is the official way to say that. And Blake, I think our audience thinks that, we turn it on for the podcast, so to speak, but like
we turn it down. We're way worse.
This is just like how we talk to each other in normal life. And so we go in there and we're just doing our normal nonsense. And you're starting to get fitted. She put the camera in your ear canal and then put it on the screen. I was like, that's the nastiest thing I've ever seen.
Toby threw up all over her new carpet.
And so she's asking us questions to kind of like make sure the fitting is correct. And she says, well, what are you going to be doing while you're wearing
She said, what is your face going to be doing? And Toby said, being ugly. And I said, we're podcasters.
It's impossible. And so all of a sudden she's like, what is this podcast? And so she wanted the link to the podcast.
We said it was the ChurchGear Podcast, to which she had cussed a couple times, and she was like, oh, sorry, you're ChurchGear people. I was like, no, the gear part is the crass part. We only got half the church.
So Blake, you were like a whiny baby getting these, the goo in your ears, getting a fitting done.
And Toby didn't use the word baby when we were there. He used a different B word.
I'm like, dude, it doesn't hurt that much. And then I get in the chair and I take it like a man.
Took it like a psychopath. He just had no emotion on his face.
And apparently what's funny is when I had the foam in my ears or whatever, you can't hear much.
It was the darkest moment of Toby's life. For a couple seconds, he couldn't hear my voice.
No, that's the thing, Blake. I couldn't hear her voice. I could hear everything you said because you're so loud. Like, shut up, dude. And so I know you guys, like, you asked her, are there any, well-known artists that she's done ears for? And she said she's done for a ton of celebs.
She's on Music Row or some...
Yeah, she's on Studio Row.
And she had said that she had done, now get this, Toby, she had done her favorite band's ears and didn't know it until they had left and saw the paperwork. I was like, how would you not know what they look like?
I mean, she just did her favorite podcast ears, and I guess she did know.
Well, yeah, Smartless. We were like, hey, Smartless was there.
And I guess there were some names she couldn't say because she signed NDAs.
She literally, I'm not going to say the name, but she goes, yeah, I can't tell you about that. And then after 30 seconds goes, because her NDA was like 1 million pages.
Yeah. And I wonder if she is not going to be able to tell her future clients about us because the NDA we made her sign.
No, more just that it'd give them a headache. But speaking of something that is a cure-all for all headaches, the freelance audio engineer and the maker of loud noises and professional Karen killer, James Hurley. James, welcome to the podcast.
I definitely don't think of the cure for any headaches. That's fantastic.
I like
Karen killer.
Yeah, he's going to cure headaches by making loud noises. Now, what's the Karen killer reference?
Well, because Karens, they're the complainers in the universe. Mm-hmm. So if he's making loud noises, he's probably going to get some Karens coming up to him, yelling at him.
Oh, yeah. I see this. Yep.
Oh, let's see here. I got myself back in my ears. Give me a second.
Which that is why he is the cure-all for all headaches, because he's getting rid of all the Karens.
You guys can still hear me, right?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you. Right? We didn't lose you.
Yeah.
All right, good. OBS. Gotta love it. I'm a vidiot.
A vidiot.
That's cute. That's a good term. I like that.
Hey, I heard you talking about headphones, and I just needed to prove that somebody has to have the biggest headphones.
Oh.
Cans are cool, right?
Yeah, these are the Odysseys. I love them, but I am a 64 fam all day, every day.
We are very excited as well.
We are stoked to join you. When I told my best friend I was getting InEars, he's like, what are you getting InEars for? He couldn't believe it.
That's a good point.
All right, James, we're going to do some 5 Truths and a Lie with you, which is our game to introduce all of our guests. And the goal is for James to fool us. And I'll tell you, I haven't totaled it up this year, Toby, but we're neck and neck, I think. It's not like last year where you were destroying me.
And it's going to be a little trickier to fire you now that we have custom InEars that only fit you. Like that was part of your scheme, wasn't it, Blake?
Everything I do is for job security. All right, James, here we go. We'll lock in. We'll read them and kind of banter, but we'll lock in before we guess and get your truthness. Number 1, I have lived in 2 countries, 6 states, 13 places in the last 18 years.
That's a lot of numbers.
Number 2.
I have a headache now.
Well, he is the cure-all, which is helpful. Number 2, I once blew Hillsong's main PA at their main campus.
That would probably not be good.
Educate me, Toby. What does that mean? Like, does that mean he blew it up like it was no longer usable, or it just kind of had a blowout, like a spike?
I mean, usually, as I understand it, you overload the system and, you blow something. It's not like everything blows, but it's not good.
Something is no longer usable.
Correct, which makes the system really not usable.
That's what something blew in me then this morning. I'm so tired. We're recording this right after Philo. Number 3, I worked for NASA. I thought that said Nas, and I was like, little Nas? Number 4, I have rescued and or raised 19 dogs.
Dang. That's almost as many cats as you've raised.
I was going to say, James, will you make me number 20? Number 5, I once bought out all the food at a Taco Bell on a whim.
Dude, I am so sorry for that toilet.
I don't think that's possible. Like, you know how much $100, just $100 will get you at Taco Bell? If he bought all the food they had, you can't eat all that. You need a whole army.
I mean, maybe he didn't eat it all. He just said he bought it all.
That is connected to an end of the show night.
Okay.
Number 6, I didn't meet my wife until after I left a church she and I went to and worked at for 4 years. She sat in the same row as front of house and knew all my friends and interns, but she didn't think I was hot enough yet, and then I had a glow up.
This actually reminds me just a bit of, my wife and I went to preschool together and middle school together and didn't meet until after college.
You guys have any like old photos where you're in the same class together?
I mean, no, she was a year ahead of me. So, I mean, first night we had small group together, I brought my middle school yearbook to show like, look, here's our picture. Like we both went.
That's adorable.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Blake, I'm going first. I'm going to say he's never worked for NASA.
Toby, you're going to lose because that's what I was going to say. You took mine. I'm going to say he has not raised or rescued 19 dogs. That number's too high. All right, James, I've got the dogs. He's got NASA.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a trick question here because they're all mostly true except for the Taco Bell. I bought out all of the food at a Chick-fil-A on a whim one night with some friends. And it really wasn't that much food. I just went to order a spicy chicken sandwich and they're like, we don't have that. And I was like, well, what do you have? And they said, we've got 6 of these, 8 of these, and about 10 of those. And I was like, give me them all.
Wow.
And James is still working to pay off his debt because it was Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A and Taco Bell couldn't be further apart on price scale.
Nope.
No, but yes, I did work for NASA for a couple of years for the company SAIC, who had been contracting with NASA on that particular project for 25 years, something like that. Crazy. Yep. It was a AV. They did all their UC conference rooms, a couple of their auditoriums, things like that.
Anything in a shuttle or a space station?
I wish.
Yeah.
I wish. Although I got about this close to going into the world's largest anechoic chamber, but the guy that was going to take me was not there.
What happens in that chamber?
Yeah. Well, Blake, what is an anechoic, however you say it?
I'm going to guess it's like a sensory deprivation thing to train you for space.
Kind of.
That's about right. It's a chamber there's absolutely no RT, no reverb time. So every sound that leaves anything, it gets absorbed and does not come back. And they make them for acoustics as well as EM, electromagnetic frequencies. So you can test radio, like cell phones, things like that, power of antennas, directionality, all sorts of stuff. If you're in there for more than, they say, 15 minutes, you start to go crazy.
I'd love to rip a fart in that place. Just see what it sounds like.
It wouldn't. You would just feel it.
If you would go crazy in 15 minutes. All right, there's a lot of questions I have. We'll ask those at another time.
I have been told that everything is silent, if you catch my drift, in those chambers.
This is where the U.S. government actually tortures people.
Yeah.
Okay, you blew one of Hillsong's main PAs, so what happened there?
Yeah, okay, so when's the last time you operated on an Avid profile?
We probably have 1 or 2 in our warehouse, so not long ago.
Does it come with the little Logitech trackball? With the red ball and the dots all over it?
Yes, of course.
Of course. Well, that has a very low resolution. So I was going to put Impact, the SSL wannabe plugin, on my PA. Got it doing about 1 decibel of gain reduction. Sounded nice. And I went over to the gain knob to put 1 decibel back in. Well, put the mouse on it and I clicked it. And as soon as I touched that ball, it went straight across to plus 35.
Ooh.
And that PA took off so fast and so loud. Not only did I slam the main fader down and the cap went flying, but everybody on stage, including Jad, tore their ears out immediately. And the best part of the story is the facility guy. I don't know if he's still the facility guy. He might be, but his name was Steve LaRue. His office was a typical arena. There was all concrete poured seats, and underneath those seats was a bunker for production. And his office was deep in that bunker, like, 2 feet of concrete, whatever. He comes walking out with his hands in his pocket from his office up the stairs to the pony wall in front of house, because, it's in that first section of the bowl, puts his arms over the pony wall and he goes, "You rang?" And he goes, "Don't worry about it." He goes, "Just have a listen to it and see if anything's broken. And we'll, if you want to come help change out drivers this week, you can totally come." And there was probably about 3 or 4 of the high drivers on the one side and a mid driver on the other side were blown. So it was stunning. But I have never blown another speaker or PA before or since, because I'm too terrified.
Seems like there should be a limiter or a safety valve on these things that you have to press another button to get it to go past a certain amount of range. I mean, that's intense. DC is a terrible thing for speakers. So once you clip past a certain point, that DC is basically a voltage telling the speaker go all the way out, come all the way back in as fast as physically possible, and that's how you tear voice coils up.
Blake, you're getting an education right now. I don't think any of this is taking, but at least it's going in. It's
right.
Like your brain is an anechoic chamber. There is no echo in there. It just, all information goes and just dies.
What if that thing had gone off at negative 35 in the Anaconda chamber? Like, would that have made the Chamber of Secrets explode? Like, that would be amazing.
Oh, it was loud. The best part was, at the time, it was a PA that nobody really wanted to have around for much longer, so they were all hoping I had blown more of it.
Yeah.
Is this a life hack?
I didn't. Yeah. It's a good hack to tell your clients.
Yeah. All right, James. So you have a bit of background in production in the church world. We've got a limited time here. We try to keep our podcast under an hour. So try and give us a snapshot of your 25 plus years in church production in just a couple minutes.
I will try my best. When I was about 12 or 13, I remember clearly not having any particular talents that I was aware of.
Blake knows about that.
And it was, I was getting to the point where I was aware of that, and I was not happy. Excuse me. And so my mother had the bright idea to introduce me to the church audio guys, because I used to take stuff apart all the time. Well, I did, and there were a couple of guys in their 60s, upper 60s, and the church was about a 2,000 seat church. And they showed me how to turn the system on and where the pastor's mic was, and then they stopped showing up.
What?
Yep, that was the education I got for a 2,000 seat church. And basically, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but in a very short period of time, they stopped showing up. And it was, by the time I was 15, I was basically doing everything. We had a couple guys come and they started to help, but I had no education, no peers, no mentors, no nothing. And I was also playing on worship teams and things like that, leading worship. So by the time I got to college, I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing production anymore. It's too hard. I just, that's all I knew. It was too hard. Everything was, hard to keep under control. You couldn't keep anybody happy. I just thought it was a bunch of work. So by the time I went to college, which was at Hillsong, I didn't tell anybody I knew anything about sound, none of that. And about 6 months in, you're required to serve at either Hillsong Men or Hillsong Women at the time. So I was like, all right, I don't want to do drapes for Hillsong Women because I don't want to crawl in these tiny little understair hall. Like literally, this was my thinking. You had to crawl under these tiny stair hallway things and pull out drapes and put them up. So I was like, well, I'll go 15 minutes earlier and I'll do sound because nobody goes to Hillsong Men, just a bunch of the guys that are retired because it's Thursday morning. I can hide. I started doing it, and about a couple of months into it, this guy named Moshiri Gatiri, who you absolutely should have on your podcast one day. He was overseeing all the midweek services. And he came up to me and he said, hey, I heard you're doing sound for Hillsong Men. And I was like, crap. He goes, do you mind if I show you a thing or two about how, our process? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so he sits down and shows me how to use a parametric EQ. Boost a little filter, sweep it around to find what you don't like, pull it down. And I looked at him and I was like, and I kid you not, I said, wait, I can make something sound good. And very graciously, he goes, well, yeah, that's kind of the job. And I was like, I was mind blown. So I went and bought a pair of AKG 240s. I can't remember, those really ugly headphones.
Yep.
We don't know anything about ugly headphones.
And an iPod. And I used to listen to every song I thought sounded good on a playlist every single time I was walking between classes, walking to and from home. I mean, I had those headphones on all the time, picking out stuff, trying to hear how does they do this vocal sound, this delay, this snare drum. Like I want to be able to try to do that. So I'd get on a console, I'd flatten it out for the service, and I would try to mimic what I was hearing. And I did that every single time. I started from a completely flat scene, no presets, no nothing. And it was that period of my life that really shot me into, I don't want to do worship or youth ministry anymore. I want to do production. I fell in love with it. I truly did. I was blessed beyond belief to be invited to do from Savior King all the way up through, I forgot what album came out in 2011, but to be on the studio team to do all of the recording and the editing and stuff for that. Mixed a bunch of smaller releases for the guys. Like there was 4 youth EPs and I think they're still floating around on YouTube. I produced 3 of the 4, mixed or 3 of the 4, edited or engineered all of them. They're like summer, winter, fall, spring is what they're called. And they were the projects that were the precursor to Young and Free. That was supposed to become what Young and Free wound up being. It was the last thing I did before I left the country back to America because I couldn't get another visa. And they never did anything else because they tried to record 2 or 3 live albums and none of it was working until they found Aiden and is it Sinking Deep? I can't remember the name of the song, that piano song. That was really like the song that they were like, we found our next youth worship generation, which was awesome to see because I was at Hillsong at the time. So after college, I stayed with Hillsong. I helped the New York plant from about the first week. Actually, they were doing monthly at the time when I showed up, and then we quickly moved to weekly. Joel knew me obviously because I had worked with him on albums. So when I showed up, he was like, "Hey, Hurley, you're here. You're mixing?" And I was like, and the house guy goes, "Oh, you have an engineer? Great." And he just wanted to go downstairs and smoke for the 10 hours that we were there. So he actually was one of my favorite venue guys.
He died later that night.
He was awesome. His name was Bamba, Billy Bamba. He was awesome. He was one of my favorite people to work with. But yeah, raised up a great team there. Then we started LA. So I started flying back and forth like every other week to the LA campus. So I raised up teams there. By that time, I had taken on all of production, not just audio, and got to the age where I needed to think about retirement and things like that, and becoming financially stable, because all of this I had done as a full-time volunteer staff member.
Wow. Church
plants, even at Hillsong, don't have tons of money. So especially not when you're paying stupid amounts of money for every 8 hours you're in a venue, right? So I left Hillsong gracefully with a lot of love and blessing about 2015-ish, end of 2015, and went to a church in San Diego, got a full-time job. I often say that was the best, worst decision of my life, because the church itself wound up being not so great, but if I hadn't gone there, I wouldn't have met my wife and some really, really, really amazing people. But we took a production team of 2 or 3 audio engineers and a handful of other people to like having 40 plus audio engineers in 2 years. I'm blessed to be able to say that in my entire career, in our industry back in 2015, it was 1% women, 1%. And I had 50% or greater on my teams pretty much my whole career. And I'm blessed to be able to say that. And when I left that church, I walked into full-time system design, drafting, commissioning for a while. We started a initiative called AV Coalition, which is an advocate for churches between integrators and churches. And just with a bunch of friends, that was at COVID when we all got fired.
Yep.
We all got let go and started a company. So that's what you did during COVID. And I've been bouncing around the country, helping churches, doing live albums. I think I've done over 42. Last I counted was years ago. It was 42 live albums. There's been more since, and trained so many people I can't even keep count of it. And I'm still doing it to this day. Still designing systems, still mixing. I'm doing a lot for Joel Barnes, who is part of the Maverick family and the Elevation family, and that's my current thing. And a lot of those guys, that's one of my favorite group of people to be around and to just be creative with. They're amazing, amazing people. Taiwan Mac does a lot of their production, and he's just the most genuine, hardworking person. It's hard to keep. I mean, I've done a lot. And I think I've done a lot, but then I see what he's doing, and I'm like, good Lord, how do I keep up with that? But yeah, so it's been great. Yeah, and my weekly thing that I'm doing is mostly broadcast audio with a little bit of front of house these days. You get older and you kind of want to keep things a little quieter.
Yeah. Blake, I feel like we just ran a marathon with the career that James has had already. James, how old are you? You don't look very old.
Today is my birthday, and I just turned 39.
Well, happy birthday, man. I'm so sorry that you have to spend it with Blake, but hopefully I'm making up for a bit of that.
He's blessed to spend it with me.
I am.
I'm impressed that he doesn't have any gray hairs in his beard. Like, that's a completely jet black beard.
Are you a Just for Men commercial?
No, I am a who makes the best tweezers out there?
Ooh,
that's good. After this podcast, because we just don't talk poor about any churches, but I'm very curious to talk to you about the church in San Diego, because I grew up in San Diego. I knew lots of churches in San Diego, so we'll talk about that later. But Yeah, so going back to the Hillsong days, like I loved, Hillsong and United records. I wore those out when Blake was in diapers. I mean, we're talking like 2 or 3 years ago, right, Blake?
You beat me to that one.
So, we have a lot of assumptions when we listen to these, using air quotes in my hand, live records. So give us a little insight into the process of this. Like how much is actually happening live and how much are you guys going back for 6 months and redoing everything?
What's really, really great about that entire catalog is, for the most part, we would record on the night live, and then we would go back and we would keep all the drums, keep all the ambience. Most of the guitars and the keyboards and the basses and everything would get redone. Vocals would get redone, but we would keep all of the live spontaneous things that we could. Anything that could be kept live, we would keep. And we would add to it if we needed to.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, that turned into, Joel loved the sound of the crowd and just the raw feeling of what happened on the night. So he would push more and more to keep more and more live, which is great. We were all on board with it. So by the time they got to the Live in Miami, which at that time I was doing all New York, I wasn't involved anymore with albums, but from what I understand, Live in Miami was 100% live, and they tracked it on SSL consoles, which they don't normally tour with. They normally tour on Digico. So they were doing an SSL trial for that run, and they recorded everything live and cleaned it up. Benny Winkop did amazing with the editing, and Michael Guy Chislett and all those guys that are involved. Cleaned it up, tuned the vocals best they could, and that's really good. It actually came up really, really good.
Yeah.
And United, man, they're so well rehearsed because they've been playing together for, over 20 years now.
Yeah.
It's got to be. I've mixed for them a couple times, and it's like you push the faders up, they mix themselves.
Yeah.
Like they're very tight, very rehearsed. The tones coming off stage are dang near perfect, give or take some whatever local issues you might have to deal with. It's very... I'm jealous of Lee because he's got one of the easiest gigs out there. Now, he probably hit me for saying that, but no, he's a great engineer. But he does. He has a great gig with some great people, doing some great music, and it really is. So I could see how Live in Miami was a pretty easy capture and product to turn around in that regard. And now these days, a lot of people are doing a lot of pre-recording and things like that. I don't think Hillsong as a singular entity is doing much these days. There's some music coming out of Stockholm. There's some music coming out of England, which is kind of cool to see, the aftermath of everything that went down the last few years. A lot of the paradigms of the old ways of doing things have shifted and changed, mostly for the better. What I would say for the worse is not for the worse. It's just nostalgia.
Yeah.
Right. It was always a great church to be a part of. I always felt like I had a family in such a big church. So yeah, it's just cool to see the different approaches that are coming out these days.
What either back then or even, live records you're working on now, like what are you doing miking the room? That's kind of my, biggest question mark, because you can see all the mics on stage, but what's your approach to capturing the room?
It depends on the shape and the size of the room, but I'll give you, for instance, what was the Acer Arena at the time that I was there was the Sydney Indoor Olympic Arena. We were doing a pair of octavas. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you probably have some on.
Yep.
It's some, but you might have 100 on the shelf.
Those are cheap, James. You can't mic stuff with cheap mics, can you?
Oh, you'd be surprised. You'd be very surprised. Those hundreds of dollars measurement microphones. You'd be surprised at
we sell
what
them for
you could
$79.99.
Yeah, I was gonna say you could be surprised what you could do with a $15 eBay capsule.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, we would take 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, probably about 20 in 10 pairs, and I'd put them on stereo bars and hang them straight down from the the catwalk.
Yeah.
And I'd drop them down and I'd turn the cables to steer them how I wanted to, and I'd get them where I wanted, and then I'd tape them off so that they would stay there. And that was the sound of the outer bowl, as I call it. And we would drop Atmos wasn't a thing at the time, so we would drop a 5.1 Decatree in the middle from the basically below the, what do you call those things? The Megatron or whatever.
Okay. Yeah,
Jumbotron.
Jumbotron. There you go.
Yep. And then we always had a pair of large condensers at front of house.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Crawford called them his big room mics, and I still to this day call them the big room mics.
Yeah.
And then depending on the width of the stage, shape of the stage, there was always AKG 416, Sennheiser MKH 416 and an AKG 414 in a pair next to each other. So you'd have, your large diaphragm and your shotgun on the downstage edge, left and right. And then we'd have a choir, either like the mosh pit was actually choir. It was actually college students who could sing. And then we'd fill that with all those people. And then anybody else who wanted to be involved, they'd come to rehearsals, they'd learn the songs. We'd mic them with usually more AKG 414s.
Mm-hmm.
If we had them. They were a good workhorse mic.
Yeah. Are you dealing with phasing issues with all these room mics?
Yeah. So I did, while I was there, I was in charge of capturing all of that on the night. I was in charge of editing that. I was in charge of recording the choir, the overdub for the crowd, editing and mixing all of the crowd together to deliver stems for Sam to mix. So I would give him a near, a mid, and a far. And our paradigm for the ambience mics was we would basically, to a certain extent, we would delay back to the stage. But if you do that perfectly for everything, you are only relying then on a little bit of the window of sound changing to give you the sense of bigness and space. So we never did perfect. I can't ever remember us doing a perfect sample accurate time delay. Also, when you're that far back in an arena, you can't find an impulse.
Mm-hmm.
So most of it's by ear. So you would delay it back, all of them, by a certain amount and keep some relationship there, so it would still sound like the arena. Nowadays, when I'm doing it, if it's a smaller room, I am sample accurate, pulling it back because it's just terrible. But the bigger the room, the less accurate you have to be, because you're getting more influence from the room, and you just want to make sure that effectively, if you can hear people singing, that they're singing in time, or you can hear people clapping, they're clapping in time.
Okay,
is effectively what you want to hear. You don't want to hear with the clapping. It's not so great.
And I know, Hillsong, Elevation, everybody's listening to these records, and their pastor gets a hold of them and thinks, hey, we could do this at our church. And what are some of the most common pitfalls you're finding churches getting into when they think, let's do a live record, and then translating into the finished product?
Do not ever expect it to go black. It will not go black. You will not make money back on your investment. You have to be doing it for years, or have some breath of God breathed on you for album sales and stream licensing and all that kind of stuff to make money back on that kind of investment. So that was the biggest pitfall. Is I would see churches want to do this and think that it was going to be a great source of revenue to keep the projects going, not necessarily just for people to make money. And because they wouldn't make money, they would stop doing records after 2 or 3, because it was such an investment for the church to keep up with them. Which, if you notice in recent years, a lot more stuff is coming out because people have access to, it's the home studio revolution, but for churches. I mean, you can get a decent digital console that can capture great sound. Any Allen and Heath on the standard pre's can produce some amazing stuff. And you've got kids with access to YouTube University, and for the most part, you can find some decent stuff there. There's garbage information on YouTube, but and there's tons of guys like me who are been open books for 15 years, so they're trying their best to produce stuff on their own, or they're calling guys like me and Ty Mahowan to help them with that last 20%, which is really the 80% of the album, right? It's the 80% of the finished product is in that last 20% of effort, and which is a great way to do it. So I would say pitfalls are the other pitfalls are like, your singers have to know the songs. Is that
important?
It's important, man. Your crowd has to know the songs. I see a lot of these worship records being done where the crowds don't know the songs.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're choosing not to do crowd overdubs, which crowd overdubs is not faking a live album. It's supplementing the fact that your crowd didn't know the song. You still get all of that worship atmosphere, and you'll hear people cheering and praising or crying, or Like there's a lot of that authenticity that comes there, but it's better when people know the songs. What Hillsong used to do for a while was try to introduce new songs over a period of time. So by the time they got to the live album night, the crowd knew most of the songs. Mm-hmm. Some of them they knew that we didn't do, and some of them were brand new on the night, and it just was what it was. But I've heard whole worship projects, or I've been a part of whole worship projects these days where nobody but the songwriters in the band know the songs. And that's tricky.
Yeah.
That's very true. Lake Point did it great at this. They were introducing their congregation to songs for a long time before they just released, I think they released the whole album, or they're dropping singles right now. But they were introducing songs for months.
Yeah.
And so the congregation really knew the songs when they were there on the night.
Yeah, we were, I feel like we're veering into a territory that like all the production people want to start sending this to their worship leaders and their bands. But, we were at the MXU pop-up in Phoenix, and Stephen Brewster, who is the guru of live album production, he was just saying how many people send him songs that they say, we want to record this one. And he says, have you done it yet at your church? And they're like, no. And he's like, dude, you have a built-in A&R department. Mm-hmm. Like, do it for a couple months at your church, see if it catches, and then we'll talk about recording it. But yeah, that's, and I have been guilty of this. I'm an artist, as a songwriter. Like, I get so excited about something and I'm like, let's do a live recording.
Yep. And that was sorry if this makes noise. It's not the world's best mount. The mantra back when I was in Sydney was we would do the song 3 times. And if the congregation didn't catch on to the song after 3 times, then it wasn't a candidate. And if they did, and it got the okay from senior leadership, it was all hands on deck. We're committing to the song. Joel had carte blanche to Nick's songs at the very end. But that at least gave us a bearing to head toward for the song. So yeah, he's spot on.
Yeah. Blake, I feel like the same thing applies to podcasts. Like everybody is doing podcasts now. So like any 2 idiots with microphones, they end up doing it. And you just gotta, realize that you're just not gonna make any money doing it, right?
It has to be an SM7, and you have to have giant headphones, and you have to be in the same room where you could just talk to each other.
2 Idiots could be the name of our podcast. Also, when we were at Philo and Johnny from Worship Sound Guy, I was giving him a piggyback ride because someone put that on our wheel of options.
What about my cartwheels?
Cartwheels were great, but I bet they didn't hurt you like the piggyback rides did. We did a live interview. So he asked me my favorite podcast mic, and I said, SM58s. Apparently these are SM7s.
Yes, SM7B.
I didn't have any blood flow because I was, doing a piggyback ride. I was running out of options here.
Okay, James, we're going to veer into a territory where we can all get into a little bit of trouble, but it should be fun.
Oh, wait, are we about to talk about pay?
Yeah.
Can I ask one Marushka one more question?
Marushka. You want a Marushka in this? Can you explain a Marushka in 10
what's
seconds?
A Marushka?
So our chief of staff had a coworker her last name was Marushka, and every time when the meeting would be over and the call for last questions had been done, she'd have one more last question. So now here at ChurchGear, if you have one more last question, you Marushka. It's almost like a spell in Harry Potter, but we don't talk about that.
I think every church staff has a Marushka.
Yep.
We're going to get this to become a phrase.
Okay.
If you could pick one piece of gear in all of your time that you're like, man, you're going into a live setting, you can only take one thing with you. Everything else is going to be a grab bag. The speakers might be a grab bag. The console might be a grab bag. Plugins, any of that kind of stuff. What's your one piece of gear you would guarantee you'd have in any situation?
Oh, that's a tough one.
We're really putting James on the spot here. We didn't put this in his outline, but we asked this on one episode, and I've really liked it ever since.
If I could have one piece of gear with me at all times, it'd probably be an API 2500.
What brand is that?
API.
Oh, I was thinking maybe it could be Rupert Neve because, all right, never mind.
You're so cute, Blake.
I should have
Actually, can I take back my answer?
Sure. I'll take the API.
This is okay. Yeah. The Rupert Neve 542s.
Okay.
Anytime, anywhere.
Yeah. And I'll do a Marushka as well. James, what do you prefer to track to when you're doing live recordings?
I'm going to say it wrong because they changed the name of it, but Reaper with the Eclipse template.
Okay. What if
I forget what it's J&T audio now. I forget. I got to talk to them again and find out. But yeah, that template, Reaper's fine. It's great.
I'm going to date myself and say I would take a 48 channel radar system.
I have used 48 channel radar systems, and those preamps are nothing to scoff at.
Yeah.
And their AD is that's a good system.
Yeah.
People don't know.
Blake, what would you track to?
Thank you for asking. The one piece of gear I would take would be my Apple cell phone, as I would be calling every person we've ever met, being like, "Can you help me figure this out? Scott Ragsdale didn't answer. Todd, help me."
Okay, are you Marushka'd out?
I'm Marushka'd out.
Okay. All right, James. Now we're going to veer into some dangerous territory, but it'll be fun doing it. I get the sense that you can get onto a soapbox on occasion, so we're going to give you a soapbox here.
We did ship you one for this interview.
That's right.
Oh, it's not a soapbox. It's shampoo boxes because I don't need the shampoo.
And so we're going to get into, we're just going to touch on church production salary and pay. So let's see if we can handle this with grace and care. But, let's veer into some of these things. Let's talk about churches that don't pay enough. What advice would you give to churches to maybe prioritize or rethink or how they view salary range for their tech leaders?
If you want to keep your people, pay them. It's one of those things where it's a hard truth, especially in 2024, where, we've had dumb inflation. We've had the production industry itself blew up after COVID. It came back in force. And a lot of these church production guys, they learned a lot during COVID. They had no choice. They had to figure out how to do online streaming, and some video guys had to learn audio real fast, and audio guys had to learn video real fast. And the industry out there, the marketplace, has massive demand. And the other thing is, like, where I live, I know what the cost of housing is, and gas and eggs and meat and cheese. And I cannot for the life of me understand how a senior pastor, or oftentimes it's not a senior pastor, oftentimes it's a board or an HR person, that's really who it is, will approach these positions as if it was 10 years ago. And even 10 years ago, they were underpaid because there's this underlying culture, if you will, in church that everything's sacrifice and it's a ministry and, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, okay, great. But aren't the people you're supposed to be taking care of, like, shouldn't it at least include the people closest to you? Well, you should be wanting to make sure that your people on staff aren't living paycheck to paycheck. That should be natural, normal. You're asking people to work 40 hours a week, production people plus that, more like 20 plus that, maybe up to 80. I worked 100-hour weeks more times than I can count, than I could ever count. If I went back and lived my life, I'd have a hard time keeping count. So that's a norm. And there's been no paradigm for overtime pay, for pay raises. I can't tell you the last time I've heard a church production person tell me they got a raise. I myself, being a freelance person, I didn't raise my rates for 5 years, maybe more than 5 years, because it's just this thing of people. I was afraid people didn't want to pay. Boy, was I wrong. I have run into some great leaders, Seventh-day Adventist pastors, pastors that are at non-denoms here in Dallas, and they're not churches that are bringing in, millions of dollars a week because they have 18 campuses, and they're not, their investment of gear in their room isn't, and I'm sorry if I call anybody out by saying this, but they don't have $1 million worth of audio in their main auditorium. They don't. And they're able to make sure that they've got people on staff to produce content. And you'll love this. I'll explain this in a second. That is genuinely aiding the mission of that church. I mentioned before that I work with a church called Open Door in Burleson, Texas a lot. That pastor, Troy Brewer, if you go check out Troy Brewer Ministries, you'll see that they've got 15 food banks or something like that. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on this. All over the place. They've got safe villages and things like that where they're rescuing women and children out of sex trafficking. They are doing it. They're not giving to an organization that's doing it. They are doing it. They are building villages to educate people that they rescue so that they can get jobs. One of the girls that they rescued 18 years ago is now a VP at Nike.
Wow.
Because she was able to go to school out of that environment. Just amazing, amazing stories. And Troy has talked to us multiple times. The reason he invests in his media is because that media is spreading that message and getting people to jump on board and partner with that initiative, which costs money. You know, they're trying to get $100,000 together right now to buy a building which will enable the Mexican government to allow them to rescue people, more people. And that's why he is happy to pay high quality media people to produce high quality content.
Yeah.
I mean, if keeping people's not important to you, please tell me that being the hands and feet in Jesus is. And if you can get the message out there and get people to partner with doing that you want to at least invest in getting the message out. So I've developed a very blunt, not disrespectful, but challenging approach to these conversations. I mean, we can get specific about questions and topics, but I know you guys probably saw the one where I called out a big church recently online, directly to their HR people online. And I was like, and the funny thing is Lee's texting me and he's going, how much does it cost to rent an apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment where that church is? And I'm like, not enough. They're not making enough to get a studio apartment. And I hope they're not married and have kids. So you're going to get a single 18-year-old that's still trying to figure college out, who's like, yeah, I'll do that. That seems like a lot of money. And as soon as they have to go to college or go out and be on their own from their parents, they're going to realize that's not a lot of money real fast. And you're going to be running that wheel through people every 2 years, transitioning people, because you're not willing to look at the market and go, man, we need to reevaluate this. So just, are you guys aware of what some of the rates are in the market right now for guys? Are we okay to talk about what some of the pay is out there?
I mean, I know there's a huge range. I mean, a lot of people are making, we did an entire survey of this and we have the results posted. Blake, where can listeners find it if they haven't found it?
Maybe we should cut this, Toby, in our website switch over. That's not on the top of the list. I've been trying to, advocate to get it on there. So if you email us, we can send it to you. But
podcast at churchgear.com. We've got all the results of that survey. We got a full PDF from our pay series. So yes, a lot of that information is in there. James, I want to turn it around for you. Let's talk back to, some techs absolutely are incredible at their craft. They've worked hard. They are worth their wage. And then there's some techs that they have not earned it yet. And they're thinking, well, I want to make $80,000 a year. For those that have not put in the work, what advice would you give them of, well, if you want $80,000 a year, this is what you need to be good at and able to do? Yeah.
And that's the, out there in the market, that's what people are getting minimum when they're on the road. But you have to realize that it's not cushy. None of what we do is cushy, right?
Yeah.
We can work 100 hours a week in church, or you can work 100 hours a week on the road. This is why I keep saying churches have got to be really aware of this. You've got to put the hours in. I train people and I usually start them and I say, hey, if you're willing to come and show up and like a church plants, this is easy, right?
Yeah.
Wrap cables with me. I'll be right there with you, but wrap cables with me, and learn. Then I can teach you to do the things that I need you to do to help our team be productive. Same with any other company out there. Show up to a warehouse, say, hey, I got time. What can I do? You don't have to pay me. You'd be pretty surprised how quick that turns into a job if you're willing to just show up and learn and not have an opinion about how to do stuff, and just build relationships and go out, drive the truck, unload the truck. Then all of a sudden somebody needs a monitor engineer because the band doesn't have one. Then all of a sudden somebody needs a front of house engineer, or same with video. Same applies with video and lighting. But be willing to, in a healthy way, not say no, right? I still think this is a little bit toxic, but there's no controlling this, right? This is just a global thing. The minute you start saying no to stuff, people stop calling. So you've got to, if you're going to do it, you've got to commit. And like, if this is going to be your passion, let it be your passion until you've decided this is not my passion.
Yeah.
And with all encouragement, go find out what that passion is. Where's your talent lie? Because you're not going to spin into a freelance thing without some clientele. You're not going to get a clientele unless you get yourself out there, right? And a great way to do it, a lot of friends of mine have gone out with companies and they've met bands, and bands have gone, hey, I'm going on a 3-week tour and I need a guy. You might be the bus driver, the tour manager, the PM, and the front of house guy all in one. But that's how you get started. Yeah. And that's how you get called onto Olivia Rodrigo shows and then wind up like a friend of mine on the Taylor tour, right? And he started at, I don't think it's James. Is it James River that's out there near AOG headquarters?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he started at James River a long time ago. He's a Jersey boy like me. You know, he showed up in LA, jumped on my team. He allowed me to speak into him and how I wanted our stages run. And before you knew it, I couldn't keep him on the roster because he was getting called out more and more. You know, not to my benefit, just to his benefit. He listened and he was moldable and efficient. He tried very hard not to forget details, and he's very detail oriented. And now he's a guy I call when I have a very high stakes project and I cannot have my stage falling apart.
And that's really Blake's entire intention here at ChurchGear. He's putting in the reps so that hopefully someday Taylor will call for him to jump on her tour. Do you feel like you're moving in the right direction, Blake?
Toby, I didn't know you knew my master plan. James, all jokes aside, we have tried to get someone from Taylor's tour so many times. It's a fat NDA. Any chance you think that they would come on the show, or is that just, should we give those dreams up?
It's not really an NDA. Really what it is safety, because there's just so much publicity around. So a lot of the guys, they've sort of kind of talked about it, at least from what I've been told. They're just not posting about it because they don't want to have to deal with security issues. Yeah. Especially Taylor. Taylor, you know, she's got too many people watching her from every angle, tracking her planes and all that kind of stuff. Blake.
Hey, I don't track her planes. All right. I want her to not be tracked.
You're in the fuselage, but you're not tracking it.
No. Yes.
But I do know people, and when the Eras tour is winding down, I'm sure a couple of those guys, at least the guy I know, he doesn't work for Taylor's side of the show. He works for, she brings out, like right now she's got Paramore out, and Amy Tong, I think it's her name. Great tech. She's her YouTube's amazing. You can go find her. She's the girl that labels everything, like literally labels everything. By the way, label everything. Yeah. She's out with Paramore all the time, and Paramore's out with Taylor now. So a lot of those guys, I happen to know some names of some of the guys that are running it, but I don't know how comfortable, because those people don't even know me. They don't know who I am. They don't know that I know their names. So they're probably not going to be comfortable with me sharing that I know that they're front of house or they're whatever. But you know, I can get you in touch with people down the road who could be willing to put you in touch with those people.
Sounds great. Sounds like some good off-mic conversation here.
Yeah.
And James, I'll give you one more in the salary discussion. So some of our listeners and a lot of people out there, they love the church. They're called to serve the church, and we love that. And they want to stay in production. They love production. And there are, well-paying jobs in churches out there. A lot of churches are starting to, realize that we need to pay great people what they're worth. And so, there are jobs, 80,000 plus, six-figure jobs. But it's not just guys that can wrap cables that are, just technically minded. What does a church that's going to be willing to pay six figures for somebody in production, what are they looking for in a complete package?
You've got to be multi-talented. Right. I joked before that I'm a vidiot, but I know enough video to design a system and to get by. I know enough lighting to design a system and get by. So you've got to be multi-talented, because there could come a day where the church pivots and you need to be able to do something quick. And if they're looking at you, they're going, you're our guy. Like, we need to know what to do in AV on this. You have to be worth, that kind of, like, you're not going to get paid $100,000 to be the front of house guy for 2 days a week.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to get paid $100,000 to be, the Swiss Army knife guy who's there ready to make teams happen, grow teams, make people happen, make sure it's community based and not work based, not transactional. Teams are not transactional, they're relational. So if you're that guy who can also step into the building meeting and go, hey, I can help us get the system correct, or at least put us in touch with the right people to make sure we're not wasting money on this, or, whatever it is, you've got to be willing to learn. You got to be willing to, learn is probably the best thing I could say, because the tech is changing so fast. I'm learning, I've been doing this for 26 plus years, and I'm learning every single day, partly because I break everything.
Yeah.
But you've got to be able to pivot. I got clients that are calling me and they go, hey, I want to do SMPTE 2110 at our next building. Great. I have to know how to do SMPTE 2110. And I know that it's been around for a little while in development, but now that it's pretty ratified and there's a lot of stuff coming out for SMPTE 2110, if you don't know about SMPTE 2110, go learn. You got to know if some executive pastor goes to some leaders conference and that leaders conference has AV guy from Gateway or wherever, or Skylark's a great company, says, hey, this is what you're able to do on a network. And they come back and they ask you, hey, what's SMPTE 2110 about? It looks like it could save us some money. You got to know.
Yeah.
Get on the listen podcasts. This is a great podcast. Listen to this podcast.
Yeah, I was at Philo was at our booth, and a young guy came up to me. His name was Noah. Shout out to Noah. You know who you are. And we're just chatting for a minute, and he said, hey, what advice do you have just so I can, grow in my, future in tech? And I was like, well, first of all, you're doing the right thing just asking. But I'm like, yes, absorb everything, read books, listen to podcasts. And then I've said it 1,000 times, it feels like in the podcast, I'm such a proponent of building relationships with other production people that are further beyond you. And go to the church down the street, go to other churches in your town and say like, hey, can I come over and tour? Can I come ask questions? Can I buy you a cup of coffee? And it's amazing. The production community is so open. Like, I've never experienced a group of people, I feel like, that are so open with what they know to want to share it with others. So just, everything you're saying about like absorbing and learning and growing is, there's a future.
We're a tribe. We want to know each other. That's why we also did that Church Creatives Network, basically because we're a tribe and we want to connect people. We want people. It's a great guy here. His name's John. He is an AV director at a church down the road. He reached out to me and he goes, hey, can I take you for coffee? Because he found out I was living here in Texas, in Dallas. And I said, absolutely. And that's my biggest heartbeat is being able to be relational, pastoralist, if needed, to, guys that are really in the thick of it at their own churches and sometimes don't have the resource of that kind of relationship. But yeah, we're just, all of us are more than willing to grab coffee, especially if it's a write-off for some of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I was going to write a blog post for how to make $100,000 as a church tech, what you said, James, on knowing more than one thing, that would be on there. Okay, another way to make $100,000 at a church would be to prevent all the disasters that could happen.
Oh, I like your segue here, Blake. I got to give you one.
That's going to get me through the weekend, Toby. Thank you. So tell us about a moment, where everything went wrong, how you recovered, how you explained it to leadership or the artist afterward, or maybe a moment where you averted a disaster from occurring.
Oh, there's so many disasters.
You know what? While he's thinking of it, I'll tell you, James averted a disaster for this very podcast because I had somehow booked him on May 3rd and May 10th. And
I just figured you loved him so much you wanted to record 2 different podcasts with him.
And that's very true. And he was like, hey, are we doing both of these? I don't really have that. My hourly rate is too much for you to afford me for both.
No, I love doing these podcasts. They're because I get to meet you guys and be relational, but trying to think ahead and plan is the best way to avoid a disaster. We have a saying, we say it with fewer P's, but the secular world says it with more P's, but prior preparation prevents poor performance. And if you run into a situation, a musical, a Sunday service, or whatever, and you're just operating at, I say 100%, then you're bound to fall as soon as there's something that's going to push you beyond that. I say you have to operate in margin. You have to operate at 80% so you have 20% to give. And that's not just an effort personal thing. That's all of my systems are documented. All of my show files, config files, everything is saved. I've looked forward into musical script to see, what I'm going to need in terms of mics and things like that. I've scanned my wireless in my area for a week, and I've kept logs to see what pops up during the week so I know what I can expect during a show. I say musicals a lot because big events tend to be where disasters happen, or anytime we do something out of the usual, right? We get used to the usual, and whenever we have the unusual, that's when disaster happens. So you got to plan for it. You got to put the effort into plan ahead. We had an amazing volunteer at the time trying to manage 32 channels of wireless for a church musical. And I mean, packs and mics backstage. And she was on wireless, Shore's wireless manager. And she pulled up one of the configs and she hit OK, not reading the screen. And what she hit OK to was push the settings to all of the wireless rather than read the settings from all of the wireless, and knocked out all 31 channels literally 5 minutes before show start. Not enough time to re-coordinate or anything, but that's why we had backups. And she came running up to me in tears, and the creative director was flustered. She's like, what am I going to tell the senior pastor? What's going on? And I was like, just hold doors for 3 minutes. Let me push the wireless and verify. And I pushed it all back from a saved Google Drive and everything. And we resynced because we needed the time to resync packs and all that, make sure that everything was good. And we went off. 3 minutes delay on the show or something like that. And, I got to exercise something that got taught to me when I destroyed the studio monitors at Hillsong with a tape measure. I got to tell her, don't beat yourself up. It's an accident. It happens. We learn, we go on, and it's a lesson we can carry with us for next time. It's not worth beating yourself up over. So that's one of my favorite disaster stories.
Man, I wish someone would tell me not to beat myself up over something like that. Toby makes me get a tick mark on my forearm with every, like a tattoo every time I mess something up.
Blake, you mess something up like every 17 seconds. So I told you that the first, because Jesus says 70 times 7, you forgive those, but like you've taken it to the extreme, like exponentially.
Well, now I have full sleeves of, from all of these tick marks. James, you kind of gave a really good tech takeaway away there at the beginning of your disaster story answer. So now I'm going to be greedy and ask for a second one. We close all our episodes with a tech takeaway. So what would you say to a room full of church techs to, help make their Sunday mornings better, their jobs better? And it can be relational, emotional, spiritual, any of the O's.
I think the best for me is love your neighbor as yourself, because you've got to love yourself before you can love somebody else. And that means like take care of yourself, get rest, make sure you show up with fed and coffee if that's your thing, and then be ready to have a smile on your face because you have no idea. Like we all deal with stuff, right? And there's going to be days where you walk in dealing with stuff and you're going to want anybody to just put an arm on your shoulder and go, hey man, I got it. If you need help, I'm here. You can talk to me. Whatever it is, we're in this together. So you got to be ready to kind of be there for the rest of those people. We have community at all the places I get to be involved with. The people are family. Like they really are their friends. A lot of them actually are family, but they're friends. They do stuff completely extra ministerial, but outside of church, they're going to shows or they're going to the park with families. They're having barbecues. They're spending time with each other. So the tech is just the what we do, but the who we are and the why we do it is far more important. So just know stuff can go wrong. pastors can ask for things last minute. It's par for the course. Just let it roll off your back, like water off a duck's back. Just take it in stride, working 80%. So you have 20% to give, and remember that you're actually there with people, for people. So that's the main thing. And really, like, I know it's kind of cliche, but it makes a huge difference. I went through a season of my life where it was all about what I did. I couldn't do enough. I couldn't be good enough. And, it took me a while to learn the hard lessons, but it's like, no, just be you and let the tech happen at your capacity. Don't beat yourself up. The people around you are far more important because, God forbid something happens to somebody. I've lost too many people that I'm like, I wish I had one more time to hang out with them, or wish I would have loved on them a little bit more, all that kind of stuff. The mix I just pulled today, somebody might listen to it on replay once or twice. Who I interacted with and how I interacted that day, that'll be remembered. So that's what I want to, that's what I would tell every tech, because we all struggle with interpersonal stuff, and mostly it's because we beat ourselves up. But don't beat yourself up. You're worth having a relationship with, and you're worth having relationships. So,
man, I feel like James just put his hand on my shoulder and just made me feel so much better about life.
That's what our guests do for us. That's why we bring them on, because we're two idiots with microphones.
That should be the rename of this pod.
Yeah.
Well, James, we greatly appreciate you giving us the time today to be on the pod. Is there anything you'd like to plug or point people towards?
I do a lot of the mixing stuff I do. I post on my Instagram, James Arthur Hurley. If you're doing integration stuff and you need help going through building projects, there's AV Coalition to check out. And then we're just building community over on Church Creatives Network. It's all an outflow of what we're passionate about and who we are, who I am, the partners that I have are with that kind of stuff. So if you want to, go ahead. If you don't, I just love to hear from you in DMs or comments or whatever. I love talking to people. That's about it.
That's awesome, man. Well, we'll link those to the show notes, and we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, listeners. We're introducing a segment called Church Tech Confessionals. This is a time for any church tech to anonymously confess the worst thing they've ever done in church production. Here's one now.
So our Christmas budget this past year ended up having a little left over, and before I said anything, I went ahead and just bought a Bonavita coffee brewer out of our Christmas budget for the green room, and everybody thanked me, so I figured it was great. Nobody knew where the money came from, but we still came in under budget, and now we have a Bonavita, so you're welcome, team.
Hey, if you have your own 3 to 5 minute Church Tech Confessional, record it and send it to podcast@churchgear.com. And don't worry, we'll apply a voice changer and you'll be 100% anonymous. Your pastor will never know.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the ChurchGear Studios.
So Blake, he said, love your neighbor as yourself is his number one advice. And then I was thinking about you as my neighbor, and I've seen the way you love yourself with the food that you put in you. And so please do not love me the way you love yourself.
But I would, you as our resident narcissist would love for you to love me as you love yourself, because nobody loves themselves like Toby loves himself.
Shower yourself with tacos.
I was just about to say, pump me full of tacos. We can trade the food for tacos.
I know. So they say the number one way to improve your diet is to keep a food journal. Should we keep food journals for ourselves and then share them with each other?
Yeah, we could trade them. And if you were going to share something else with your food journal, it should be this podcast episode.
Obviously, if you are ingesting this podcast episode, you're going to have very clean digestive tract.
Oh gosh, if you ingest this podcast episode with a friend that you've shared it to, I wonder what the digesting out of this podcast episode would be.
Yeah, I guess it looked like podcast poo.
Gracious.